Now, as Ghana strives to reach a board-level agreement with the International Monetary Fund, President Akufo-Addo has called on Germany to encourage China to support Ghana's debt restructuring exercise. Now, the president believes an agreement with the Paris Club and China could boost Ghana's quest to restore economic stability after debt stock raised more than 93% of GDP. The president made the call when the visiting German Finance Minister Christian Lindner called on him at the Jubilee House.
Our target is that by the middle of March, we should be before the board for the full agreement. We have already taken one important step forward in concluding a staff-level agreement with the IMF, and we're now looking towards going the full hog and concluding the agreement. And we're hoping that will be done by the middle of March. One of the steps towards that has been the domestic debt exchange program that we are on, which fortunately, after quite a lot of difficulty, has now been virtually concluded. We now have our relations with the Paris Club, and the common framework, and we are looking for, as quickly as possible, a creditor committee to be established, so we will have the body with whom we can engage to bring those discussions as quickly as possible. You have the relations with China, and we'd like you to sorry, let me say that. To encourage China to participate.
Let's now hear from German Federal Minister of Finance, Christian Lindner, who says Germany is willing to support Ghana as it restructures its debt ahead of securing an IMF deal to tackle current economic crisis.
We see economic challenges in Ghana, but opportunities for bilateral trade. And this is why we are here. We've met some business people and entrepreneurs from Ghana. We met the private banking sector. And as mentioned, we had a very constructive and fruitful exchange of views with my colleague. And I'm so frank to call him friend, the finance minister of Ghana, about the current situation and in which way Germany can be of help to overcome the current situation.
Now, my colleague with our research desk here at Joy News, Isaac Kofi, has been studying Ghana's external debt portfolio and joins me in the studio for some analysis on this. Now, Kofi, tell us how important, it is for Ghana to get China to accept to be part of this deal.
Right, Bruce. So just like we won $3 billion from the IMF. There's a condition that we have to follow as a country. We have to meet that condition. And this is the condition that we are talking about. Our debt burden is more than $500 billion currently. If you look at the external component, it's more than 382 billion Ghana cedis. If you convert it to dollars, around $29 billion that we're talking about. The domestic component is somewhere around 193 billion Ghana cedis. But this is the stumbling block that we have to face. This is actually the challenge.
The domestic one?
Both.
Okay.
In fact, our debt stock has become, unsustainable to the extent that we have to take steps to restructure before we get the 3 billion IMF program. Now, let's look at, the international front. And you see our bilateral, creditors, the outlook for external creditors.
Whoa.
So if you look at China alone, the bilateral, arrangement, the debt that we are owing is about $4 billion. And China alone has about $1.7 billion of this money.
China has some 2.3 billion.
China is actually supposed to be 1.7 billion.
Okay.
And the rest is about 2.3 billion.
Okay.
So if you look at China as just one country and you compare it to other bilateral, creditors, and China holding about 1.7 billion, it tells you that China is, having about 45% of the total bilateral debt that Ghana is currently carrying at the international front. Now, look at this. This is staggering. The total, external debt as of, the third quarter of 2022 was around $28.4 billion. And China, just one country. Even if you combine the Paris Club countries, including, US, Germany, France, and other countries, The debt we are owing to them is just 1.9 billion. And China alone, Ghana is owing China 1.7 billion. That's the single country with the highest debt if you look at this sheet. And if you look at the Euro bonds, it's around 13.1 billion, the highest multilateral 8.1 billion. But the total 28.4 billion that we are owing, if you want to look at it on the bilateral front, China is actually holding the biggest percentage. On the bilateral front, it's around 45% that we're talking about. Let's look at the last, chart. Okay. And it's from 2006 to 2020. And you look at how, the Paris clubs, China, India, UAE, if you call Kuwait, are borrowing to other countries. And look at the difference between how much is borrowing to lower income countries versus the Paris clubs and other, UAE and Kuwait countries. China, right from 2014 to 2020, has been borrowing to lower, income countries, and Ghana is included. Although we are a middle-income country, we've signed a number of, agreements with China. If you look at the Sino-Hydro deal, is about 2 billion.
But that's not part of this, right?
That probably should be part. Maybe they will not add it to it because the Sino-Hydro deal is probably like a special purpose vehicle. It's different because you want 2 billion from me. How am I going to pay? You are giving me access to your bauxite. So probably it will be different from the other arrangements we have with Euro bonds and other bilateral. But if you look at the picture, and if you really want to restructure your debt, China having about 1.7 billion, owing China about 1.7 billion, it means that you really need to reach an agreement with China before you can call your external debt restructuring successful.
Let's talk about the G20 common framework and why Ghana wants to capitalize on that in this instance.
Well, this was introduced after COVID. China, there's this US, France and Germany all came together to say that, look, we're looking at the lower income countries and we've seen that they are suffering, especially their liquidity trapped. So let's do something to help them in terms of helping them not to be to go into insolvency. So let's do something to help them so that they can pay their debt, or we can, suspend, debts.
Some of the debts they
owe. Servicing. So they came together, and countries like Zambia, Ethiopia, I think they all took advantage of it. But this program was actually designed for lower income countries, and Ghana was a middle-income country from 2010, we became a middle-income country. So probably we couldn't take advantage then, but now we've seen that we need this kind of aid. And so countries have already taken advantage of it. We know Ethiopia, Zambia is still in talks so that they can have their debts, reduced, or there's supposed to be a new restructuring for them to still get. They have the IMF
want
deal.
To take advantage.
We also want to do that so that we can have the IMF executive board approval to start, rolling out the 3 billion IMF program that we're talking about. So it's very important. We need, the Paris clubs to come on board. We need China to be on board. In fact, the whole G20 to come on board, and then also Eurobond market and each and every one that we owe in as a country. 28.1 billion is so huge that we need to restructure before we get a 3 billion.
Grateful. Let's move on to Zoom now and speak to Professor Lord Mensah, who is a senior lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, how important will China's inclusion in the debt operation exercise be to securing an IMF deal?
Yeah, if you look at the debt composition, clearly China plays a bigger role in terms of the creditor holdings of the various bilateral debts that Ghana is holding. And so as a result of that, China's debt being the bigger animal on the floor, you may start the negotiation with China. And some of these negotiations and acceptance are more or less contagious. So whatever you get with China, it's likely that other creditors will also follow through. So the call by the president wasn't just, a rhetoric. It's something that, he means it. Because if you're going to negotiate on your debt and you're able to convince your bigger creditor, in terms of the bilateral debt very well, and all those countries that are holding up, other bilateral debt will definitely, fall through in the same line. So whatever is accepted by China, I believe that will have effect on the other countries as well. And probably that is why, the president is asking for Germany to speak to China so that they can come to terms with them. Now, if you look at China and the way they look at, you see, most of the Chinese loans are quite friendly. And usually, when loans are soft, the possibility of defaulting it and the measures that comes with default are quite harsh most of the time. And so I'm afraid that is probably going to be different from other bilateral, debt that we have with, these Western European countries. That may probably quote interest rate of about 7%. China, when you get there, they will tell you you can have a loan of about 2%, 1% thereabout. But, the processing of the loan, and then in the process of defaulting and restructuring, the terms behind, the things that you must do, to some extent, they can even come to your country to confiscate some assets that they can operate to offset the debt. So these are things that probably the president, has, seen it coming. And that is why possibly he's calling on Germany to impress on China to come to terms with the country.
Now, Ghana has been a lower middle income country since 2010, and we understand that the G20 Common Framework for Debt Restructuring was designed to assist poor countries. Are we likely to face difficulties based on our status?
Yes, we are the lower middle income status, and that common framework was designed purposely for lower income countries. And Ghana being just a step above, these countries, definitely will have, problems. But not to say that the bilateral, countries or partners may not come to the table when it comes to negotiations. Definitely, they may come to the table, but may not necessarily be on the conditions of the G20 framework that has been supporting other countries like Ethiopia and all those.
Grateful to you, Prof, for joining us here.